I've suffered my share of physical and mental pain in my life and difficulties. I lost my father when I was 15. I had some severe sciatica where I had to quit my job as a carpenter. I've had toothaches that made me just want to die. And moments where life just seems so overwhelming that I wonder what's the point at all. But I always pull through. I always manage to navigate these difficult times. And as a man, I generally keep it to myself, like a lot of guys do. But of all the things that I've endured in my life, all the different difficulties I've had, what came to mind as the most difficult thing that I've ever faced in my life is being a parent. I have three boys. Two of them that live with us will be 13 and 16 this summer, and my oldest is 30. He's my stepson technically, but I met my wife when he was like 3, so I consider myself his dad, and so does he. We grew up in a time where, as my, I guess, stepson, it was easy for me to not feel I had as much obligation when I was younger, in my early 20s, but I still felt the obligation. In other words, like I thought, well, you know, we'll get together. We moved in together, and I thought, but I'm not 100% obligated. But I am, because I am the father now. That's how it works. I am there playing the father role for this child. And it was new for me. I was a party youth. I mean, I went out with my friends. We went camping and hung out and partied all the time. And then I met this wonderful woman who had a kid. And I remember the night she told me, oh, I have a son and he's 3. And I remembered the feeling that went through me. It was like, oh shit, what? A son? Like, and I understand why, you don't just tell somebody outright, by the way, I got kids. But it was like our first date, and I was willing to take that role on and be that father figure. And I did my best. We only had him until, I mean, he was about 15 years old, going on 16, when my wife got pregnant. And then we had my son Emerson in 2009, and then she had my son Sawyer in 2012. 3 years apart, just like my brother and I. And this, 2 boys with a 3-year spread, there's going to be a lot of arguments and debates. So I warned her years ago this was going to happen, and here we are, as teenagers. It's getting better now that, my oldest, or my 16-year-old, 15-year-old, he's very intelligent. All of my kids are, but he's, I tell him it's up to you to take care of your brother, and you guys need to understand the value of having a sibling in your life, because your older brother never did, and that's perhaps what made it easier to be a parent then. 2 things. Number 1, it was just a single child. Number 2, I could plead ignorance because I was young. After him growing up, seeing where we did good and where we did bad, where we could have done better, he's a phenomenal human being. He's like one of the coolest people I know, and I'm stoked to have him as my son. He plays in a band. I've shared it on YouTube here. They're called Flying Caravan, and they play a lot of Portland shows. They're going to go on tour. They're phenomenal, and I'm so proud of him. He met a girl. She's the singer in the band. They live together, play music together. That's all I ever want for my kids, is for them to be happy. But even though he's got it made, and he has moments, okay, and I feel like it's my fault as a parent that there was something I should have taught him, but it was at a time when I didn't have the lessons properly in my heart to teach him. And that's the irony. Now that I have those lessons in my heart, I still haven't figured out how to properly implement them and teach them to my other kids. Like, my kids, I don't like to talk about my personal life because of that very reason. It's a personal life. But let's just say every teenager today is struggling. and I see it firsthand. And that's why I think this video is important, that I wanted to make it, to talk about not just raising kids, but being a kid, what it feels like to be a teenager in today's world. And the best way I've heard it, pointed out was very simply, like, it was by some kid that was 18 to 20 something, younger guy. It was some video on YouTube that I saw through another video where a guy was saying, listen to this kid. And the guy that was sharing the video was like a Gen Xer like me. But we're kind of stuck at the crossroads. Gen X, I'm almost 50. I'll be 50 this year. And my parents' generation was kind of the, still put up with abuse and bullshit generation. Kids were just, go to school, dads worked, moms stayed at home, and that was over by my generation completely. Women's lib and feminism, as well as the hippie movement and psychedelics and the revolution that was brought on by thinking for yourself, which is a great thing. People started to break away from that. So my parents' generation, realizing this, said, well, let's let our kids just kind of run free. And we were the latchkey kids. We just roamed free. I've said this a million times, but yeah, even at like 10 years old, I rode my bike down to my old apartment building. It was like miles away down the highway, from like Hillsborough to Beaverton, down Highway 26. It's just crazy to think, if you saw that today, people would call in, the cops would be all over it. It's like, no, I'm not lost. I'm just not a dumbass. I'm 10 years old. Give me some credit. And we treat kids younger and younger like they need more and more protection now, instead of the fact that they're becoming smarter at younger ages. And I try to give my kids that respect. The fact that I know that they are highly intelligent and that they can figure this shit out. They get frustrated with me because I'm just like a little bit wary about maybe them going out because their mom's wary, and I want them to be protected. And when they go to the mall or they go to the park, I try to leave them alone, let them do their thing. And that's what it was like for us. But it's damn hard because it's a different world out there. I don't think it's any more threatening. Now, a lot of people think that there's a lot more pedos and freaks and people who are looking to get kids these days. I don't believe that to be true at all. I don't see it statistically. They've always been there. There have always been the creeps. But if I were to let base my life on the fear of that happening, I wouldn't let my kids do anything, right? Because you find out that it often comes from somebody at the church or somebody at the summer camp for your kids. These are the jobs people take who sometimes want to do that shit. It's unfortunate because most of the people are good-hearted. It doesn't reflect on the general person who works at a summer camp. There are some real dirtbags who insert themselves in positions of power so they can do these things. But I think that it's actually becoming more and more called out. The Boy Scouts have let people slip. The Catholic Church have let people slip. People are noticing. They're standing up. They're saying, I can be heard now through YouTube or elsewhere. And that's good. Before, people couldn't be heard unless the media covered it. And the media doesn't want to attack the church, right? So anyway, I think that's important because kids need to be protected first and foremost. And for raising my kids, if I found out that something had happened to them, I won't even go into detail, but let's say I'm not your average hippie. I might have to buy a new shovel. I would not tolerate that shit. And being aware is key, but it's not the biggest deal. It's not as likely to happen to your kids as you think, to where you shouldn't let them go to the park by themselves. This is really important to me. A lot of parents are what they call helicopter parents. And the helicopter parent is, let's just say, a little overly protective. And they're the ones that not just watch over their kids and don't let them go out on their own, but the ones who insist their kids take this class or that class or do this instrument because they want them to be a certain way. For me, I just have the faith that if you direct them, show them what you do, hopefully, like, that's another point I'm guilty on. Like, I used to do a lot of woodworking and building guitars and shit in the garage. Kids saw that, they wanted to do it. But lately, I haven't been that motivated, so I'm like, I need to stay motivated. That's the thing. That's what I mean about being the hardest job. I can slack from work and be like, okay, whatever. But when it comes to your kids, you can't. You got to take them, take the dog on a walk with them. You got to get out with them and talk to them. You got to go in their room and sit down and say, what's up? They might not even want to say a word to you, but you've got to try. You got to try as a parent. So, my sympathy to all the parents out there, I would say I have much more sympathy for those who have kids who are just reaching their teen years, because that's the worst time, the most difficult time. But I'll say this, it does get easier, I swear. If you teach your kids well, you just teach them basic morals and values, it does sink in. It just takes time. And we got to be careful not to implement a bunch of bullshit that we don't know what we're talking about, right? So, telling our kid to be a certain way when we don't behave that way, that's not going to fly. Kids aren't dumb. So we have to actually live the reality we want our kids to live. And the kids are the most important, because we've had our shot and we can still make shit happen, but without them, there's no future for it. So you got to convince your kids not just that, they can do it, but that you can do it, and that your ideas are worth carrying on. And ultimately, that is the history of man, my friends. So I will see you next time. Hopefully, we're all evolving our souls together for a greater good. Or at the very least, Pascal's wager says, might as well have some hope, right? I'll see y'all next time. I guess that was on the last video I talked about Pascal's wager, but I threw it in. Maybe that comes full circle, right? So howdy ho, my friends. See you next time.